Hi everyone, and welcome to the Big Book Compendium Big Book Study. My name is Toya. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Let's have a moment of silence, followed by the set-aside prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, about the 12 steps, and please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. The Big Book Compendium is not affiliated with AA, CA, DAA, or any other 12-step organisation, nor are we bound to any fellowship by association. Our groups are bound together in the love we all share for the Big Book and the program of recovery contained in it. We are simply a virtual fellowship hall where all are welcome, regardless of their addiction or imperfection. Page 60 of the Big Book best describes what Big Book Compendium is all about. In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. So thanks all for being here. I'm sitting in for Rach. She's away working and I'm away on an AA weekend. And it's an absolute privilege to be here. So we are on the doctor's opinion, Roman numeral XXV or 25. And my apologies, I haven't been to this study before. As I said before, it's 1 a.m. my time zone, so it's not one I'm usually attending. So hopefully I'm following the usual order of things well enough today. And so the doctor's opinion, and the doctor we're talking about here, of course, is Dr. Silkworth. He was known as the little doctor who loved alcoholics, which to me says something about the spirit and compassion of this man, because who loves alcoholics? Anyway, so let's start. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. So those 3 lines there just tell us a lot already. That first word, we, this fellowship, and the first word of the 12 steps is we. I can't, we can. I can't do it alone, but I alone must do it. And so the plan of recovery described in this book, that tells me what this book is about. And continuing on, the 4th line, convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. One of the things I do when I study the book is do some cross-reference. You're welcome to do that if you wish to or not, or just enjoy and read along. So in my book, I highlighted those words, our return to health. I call that a promise, and I cross-referenced it to page 133. And on page 133, first full paragraph down, 5th line, about the middle of the page, we who have recovered from serious drinking are miracles of mental health. And I've underlined the word recovered and highlighted that in pink because that's a promise. That tells me that I can have a miraculous return to mental health or a miraculous recovery of mental health, specifically that I am a miracle of mental health, and I can certainly identify with that. And continuing on, back on Roman numeral 25, a well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specialising in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. So Dr. Silkworth wasn't just a doctor, ordinary doctor, GP. He actually specialised in alcoholism and drug addiction. And just a little side note, in the first edition of the big book, Dr. Silkworth didn't put his name. If you have a look at the first edition, it simply said something like yours sincerely, ... MD, because he wasn't sure whether this thing would take off or how it would end up. He wasn't sure whether he wanted his name associated with it. And those who have been here or read the book before, you know from the forwards that it grew and mushroomed pretty quickly. The success rates are quoted, in various ways, but up to 75% success rate has sometimes been noted. And so in this letter, Dr. Silkworth says, "To whom it may concern, I have specialised in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless." And there's a paradox. For an alcoholic to come to AA and be hopeless, that's a great thing. I know when I'm working with people, I can see when someone's still a little bit puffed up, still got some ideas about how they can do it, how they know better. I know that I'm probably not going to be able to help them much because I've got plans and ideas, then I'm going to need to do those. I have to investigate all possible avenues. I've got to exhaust all ideas. So if I come to AA and I'm all out of ideas, then I've probably got a good chance of being able to take on this way of life. So, and that's what's so remarkable about Dr. Silkworth. I get disheartened myself, and I don't do probably a fraction of the work that Silkworth did, and he was tireless. And yeah, so continuing on, in the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. And so I circle the musts in the book. I always circle the musts. Sometimes I don't hear it so much in meetings, but I used to sometimes hear people say there are no musts in AA. I don't know where that came from. Maybe it's died, maybe it's not doing the rounds anymore, but there are certainly a lot of musts in the big book. And again, that sentence tells me so much. So much of Alcoholics Anonymous is contrary to what happens out there in the mainstream material world. And the idea out there would be that you have to be competent and perhaps have long-standing education or experience in order to be able to help anyone. But what this is telling me here is that as part of my rehabilitation, as part of me getting well, not wait until I get really well and then I help others. This says that in order for me to get well, I have to try to help others. That's part of my rehabilitation. And for me, that continues long term as part of my rehabilitation and in order to maintain and grow the experience I've been given, the spiritual experience. And the next sentence, this, I've underlined this, put a little arrow to above that. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. So working with others, helping with others, that is actually the basis of this. So again, there's this misconception. That's my latest kind of soapbox, if you like. The misconceptions that are out there about AA, that this is group therapy, that you somehow have to keep working on yourself, working on me, till the cows come home, until I think I'm well enough to help someone. Seems to be the quicker I start trying to help someone else, the quicker and more solid my own recovery is going to be. And that certainly flies in the face of conventional mainstream helping industry thinking. And this man and over 100 others appear to be recovered. And I underline the word recovered. And so going from hopelessness to over 100 recovering, this must have been, you can understand Dr. Silkworth's enthusiasm, and AA owes such a debt of gratitude to Dr. Silkworth. He helped so many, and he was such a good friend, and he was an instrumental link in the founding of AA. There was Carl Jung and Roland Hazard and Dr. Silkworth and of course Ebby, but we mainly focus on Bill and Bob, but there were all these other good friends of AA that really stuck by us and helped us and carried the message, and Harry Tebow, of course. And Dr. Silkworth goes on to say, I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. So other methods, yeah, probably psychotherapy, drug therapies. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group, that they may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. And those two words, epoch, in the annals of alcoholism, no matter how many times I look that up in a dictionary, I can't quite get my head around it. But it's just a time period in the history of alcoholism at that time. And so we know before Alcoholics Anonymous, there wasn't much. There was that group, was it the Washingtonians? They actually got up to about 100,000 in numbers, but because they got involved in other things, they thought they could fix the world's problems rather than just focus on alcoholism. They fell apart, and probably other kinds of problems hit them as well: power, property, prestige, personalities. So AA was smart enough to, yes, of course, in the Oxford group, Sam Shoemaker, who else was it? Yeah, a lot of people, the Oxford group, of course, and that's where we got our those four absolutes. That was the basis, the beginning of this wonderful fellowship that we're members of today. So these men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. And we know today millions, not just alcoholics, but we know there's 100, 150, 200 different 12-step programs, but it's the same. Spiritual malady, get connected to a higher power through the 12 steps, and you can go on and become happily and usefully whole. And I've taken that phrase straight out of the 12 and 12 because that's a beautiful promise and one that I really, really like and love. And Silkworth finishes the letter by saying, you may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves, because the pride, the shame, the denial, the delusion about alcoholism has gone. We're living in the truth, rigorous honesty. That in itself is incredible when I stop to think about it. Someone who was ducking and diving and weaving and bobbing and full of shame and dishonesty can now just honestly talk about my alcoholism and my life and what I did and what happened. And he ends the letter there. Very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. So twofold illness, body, I've underlined that, mind, underline that, the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind. But another way I can understand alcoholism is threefold illness. not forgetting the spiritual as well as the mental and the physical. So if anyone's new, welcome. If anyone's new to Alcoholics Anonymous, as I said, it's my first time here, so I don't know who's who here, but I highly recommend, if you don't already have a sponsor, find one, get them, go through the book with them, or if you've got some friends or anyone, start your own book study, even just two of you. Sometimes it just grows. You start studying the book together with someone, the third person gets wind of it, they want to jump in as well. And that's why that was my hope when I did a big book study a couple of years ago, that people would then go on and do their own big book studies and carry this message and grow this fellowship of the fellowship of the Spirit. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. So those kind of explanations about my drinking, which maybe from therapists or doctors trying to dig around and dig down, why am I an alcoholic? What makes me drink? And I think the idea is still prevalent out there that if we can just crack that nut, why does a person drink, that it's somehow going to magically provide an answer, or perhaps a person's going to be able to then drink. It, as I say that out loud, to me, it just sounds so ludicrous, but because of what I've learned in AA about this twofold illness, the body and the mind, and to be caught in that mental obsession, it's like being under a spell. You can't, how do you even break through that? And I think it's only through the grace of God, the unmerited favor, that a person can go from that state of delusion to somehow seeing the truth about themselves, and even further to become willing to do something and to follow this way of life. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy, so I've underlined allergy, and above that I wrote abnormal reaction. So it's not an allergy as in I break out in a rash or hives or something. This allergy manifests by that phenomenon of craving, which we'll go on to in a minute. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as at an altruistic plane. So spiritual, I just wrote God there, and altruistic, working with others. And yeah, it's funny. Is there any real altruism? And I know no matter how little effort I try to put into Alcoholics Anonymous to try to carry this message or do service or pay it forward or pay my debt, the abundance rains on me more and more, and my debt to AA grows. And so we have that, the spiritual and the altruistic. We favour hospitalisation for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. Absolutely. Alcohol's a highly toxic poison. And for someone who's been drinking literally gallons and gallons of alcohol day in, day out for years or decades, I'm not going to be able to help that person. They're going to need medical help. My drinking never progressed to that stage, but I believe from what I've been told, it could possibly be fatal for someone to stop drinking suddenly. They may have other health conditions, through self-neglect or just the sickness of that toxic poison. So definitely someone who's in the chronic stage is highly recommended to get medical help for that physical aspect, the physical dependence of alcohol. It's such a deadly drug. More often than not, it is imperative, so imperative, very important, that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he has then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. So there's an approach reference. It's one of the things I've only learned in recent years in the big book, the approach references. This idea that I just sit back and wait. If someone wants help, they'll come to me, they'll come and find me. That's not really the message that's been carried here. As we know, Ebby was 2 months sober when he sought out Bill. He approached Bill. He put the coin in the phone box and rang Bill and said, can I come and see you? But I'm jumping ahead. And sadly, believe it or not, there are still people out there who don't really know what AA is, possibly even have never heard of AA. I don't know if that's true or not. Seems hard to believe. But obviously, if someone's in a highly dependent state and very, very sick, their brain is addled. They can't understand. They're not going to hear. It's a very, very sad place for a person to be. But I underlined those two words on XXVII 20. There's a little message in the chat. I'm going to come to that in a minute. XXVII Roman numeral 27, understanding, underline. I've got to understand and accepting what we have to offer. We're offering something here. We're offering a solution, a way of life, a fellowship. And so we got a dictionary definition there for the word epoch, which is on the previous page, first word on the second line. A fixed point of time established in history by the occurrence of some grand or remarkable event. A point of time marked by an event of great subsequent influence. As the epoch of the creation, the birth of Christ was the epoch which gave rise to the Christian era. Thank you for that. I think it was Tommy. Yeah, Tommy has given us that dictionary definition. Much appreciated. See, I don't know why that doesn't sink into my brain. I could come back to doctor's opinion in 6 months' time and I'll probably still need someone to give me that definition. And a little bit more on that definition. Epochs mark the beginning of new historical periods, and dates are often numbered from them. So, Founders' Day, June 10, 1935, marks the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that marks an epoch in the annals of alcoholism. But predating that, Armistice Day, 1934, when Bill had his last drink, there's a point in time. And the second definition, a period of time, longer or shorter, remarkable for immense events of great subsequent influence. For example, the Reformation. And here, for example, the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous or the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that came from the 1913 Webster's Dictionary. So when looking at dictionary definitions, it's good. There is a big book dictionary, unofficial, that can be helpful, because words can sometimes change meaning over time. So it's good to keep it in the context and look at a dictionary of that time if you can, to get the correct definition in the context that it's used in this book. So this is the statement from the doctor here. The subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. So very important, number one, paramount, number one. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. There was, therefore, a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realised for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge, meaning the spiritual approach, because this is what we have in AA, and as was mentioned by a participant here, coming through from the Oxford group. And prior to that, I don't know if I've got the order, the Emmanuel movement, the Jacobi Club. It's really interesting when you look, well, I found that history really interesting. There's a book by Richard Dubiel, The Road, I think it's called The Road to Fellowship. Really nice, easy to read book, but that talks about the history prior to the Oxford group and the linkages of of where this has come from. So Dr. Silkworth has that humility. He had the humility to say, wow, these alcoholics, these drunks, they can help other drunks in a way that we can't with our synthetic knowledge and our science. They had had very little success. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. So he's talking about the steps. Wasn't 12 steps at the time, but that process. Practical application. So he got into action. Action is the magic word. I'm talking about Bill W. there. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. And I don't have the cross-reference written in my book, but it just came to me. I would really like to cross-reference that little bit too. Bill's story, if I can find it just quickly, jumping ahead. Maybe someone here can tell me. When Bill was unwell and depressed, and when he went to the hospital, on meeting a man there, he would be amazingly lifted up. Plagued with waves of depression and self-pity. Can't find it. Is it 133? No. My apologies. There's a part in the book. It's a program for living, a design for living that works in rough going. That part of the book talks about asking to go to the hospital and carry his message. Anyway, I'll have it for you next week. I'll be back next week because Rach is still away. I think Kelowna might have it. She's putting something in the chat, it looks like. Page 15, of course. Thank you, Kelowna. So this is the first full paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the bottom of that paragraph, the fourth word along. It says, many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. And so next to that, where it says hospital, I just put XXVII, and on the Roman numeral page, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell. I just put a little 15 in the margin. It's just something I like to do because it helps me make the linkages to the stories in the book and the explanations. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. So mostly, I mean, we can go to hospitals, of course, and we do through our PI structure, but generally public information. But generally, as an individual, I'm not going to be able to walk up to a hospital and say, oh, can I go and have you got any alcoholic patients I can talk to? We've got confidentiality and privacy and all kinds of things. But I can go to a meeting. I can go to a meeting and find someone there who might not be doing well, who might be struggling, who might not have a sponsor yet, hasn't done the steps. I might be able to share something with them. And that experience then, on talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. That's promises. That's a promise. So it is a design for living that works in rough going. I highlighted that in pink as a promise. And again, there's a bit of a paradox there. The idea that I've got to have all my ducks in a row, be doing really well in order to be able to help someone. But I have a solution. I'm sober, but I'm human. So life isn't going to be a fairy tale, and I'm not going to be happy all day, every day, because life has its ups and downs. And when I'm down, I may be lifted perhaps by trying to help someone who's worse off than me. So let's continue. Doctor's opinion, XXVII. And so with some misgiving, we consented. So Dr. Silkworth and his staff were a little bit dubious, but they agreed to it, which because they understood how hopeless this was. Thank God they were open-minded enough to say, okay, let's give it a go. And the cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has laboured long and wearily in this alcoholic field. So, yeah, the unselfishness, absence of profit motive, and community spirit, these kind of attributes or principles are the very opposite of an alcoholic that's in their cups, right? Because that is all about me, the selfishness, self-centeredness, self-seeking, what's in it for me, the loner, isolation, you know, not being interested in others, not receiving help either, just that strong individual spirit. They believe in themselves and still more in the power, the capital P, meaning God, which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor. So we talked about that, the detoxification, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. And those detox takes somewhere 7 to 14 days often, I believe. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. Again, the word allergy, I've underlined that. And the phenomenon of craving, I've underlined that. is limited to this class. I've underlined that. And never, I've underlined that, occurs in the average temperate drinker. So sometimes the book uses absolutes, always, never, those kind of words. That's an absolute there, never. A social drinker does not experience the phenomenon of craving. It is limited to this class. Only alcoholics experience the phenomenon of craving. Therefore, how could a non-alcoholic possibly understand an alcoholic? Because I can't get my head around how someone can have one or two drinks and enjoy that, really? Are they really being honest about that? Do they really enjoy just having two drinks? I don't know. So they're probably wondering, well, can't you just stop? Surely you can just stop. Why do you have to drink so much? But we have this phenomenon of craving. And I'd recommend, if anyone here hasn't listened yet to Joe and Charlie, they talk about the allergy. They describe it beautifully and give a lot more information around this specific explanation of our illness. These allergic types can never, again, absolute 100% never, underline never, safely use alcohol in any form at all. I'm not going to talk too much about that. It's a bit controversial. I don't want to talk about medications, but, you know, I understand they use particular medication to help people withdraw from alcohol. There's a reason for that, because the brain recognizes that as the same drug. So therefore, if I was using that medication, it's basically like drinking. But it is used to taper people off. Unfortunately, some people then become addicted to that same medication because it's like alcohol. The brain recognizes it in the same way as alcohol. So that's telling me I can never safely use. Use it if you want, but it might not be safe. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve, unmanageability. So willpower, having lost their self-confidence, willpower. Maybe I could stay sober a little bit on willpower for a little bit sometimes here and there, but it doesn't last. The willpower's gone, and the will to even try in the end went. It was just too hopeless. It was too hard. Failure upon failure upon failure of trying to control this thing always ended up worse, 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 because it's a progressive illness. And a cross-reference there possibly to page 58. Their reliance upon things human. No human power could have relieved our alcoholism. So it's maybe not exactly on 58, but around there. No human power. So it's in there. It's in the part that we read often in meetings. Page 60. Thank you, Kay. See, I can't. We can. B, point B. Our description of the alcoholic. I'm on page 60 now. Our description of the alcoholic, which is the doctor's opinion, Bill's story in chapter 2 and 3, that describes the alcoholic. That's all step one. The chapter to the agnostic, chapter 4, and our personal adventures before and after Bill's story and the other 42 stories in the book make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, step 1. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. So next to that, if I want to, I can cross-reference to XXVIII, Roman numeral 28. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. No doctor, counsellor, psychologist, psychiatrist, tarot reader, palm reader, spiritual guru, super sponsor, or anyone, husband, wife, brother, mum, dad, anyone whose patience and love and tolerance I've exhausted to the end, could relieve me. And continuing back on the Roman numeral page, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. So the begging, the pleading, well, surely he would stop for his lovely wife. Surely he'd stop for the kids. Surely she would stop. Please, frothy emotional appeal. It just doesn't reach the alcoholic, and it doesn't have enough force to reach and have any effect. But it's going to tell us now what can reach the alcoholic and what can make a difference. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people, I've put a 1 above the and, just a little 1 in a circle. 1, can interest, and 2, hold these alcoholic people. So when we're carrying the message, we want to get them interested and hold them, not just a passing fad or phase or curiosity, but something. So how do we do that? And then it tells us this message must, circle, have depth and weight. Depth and weight. So depth, understanding the problem, knowing what the problem is, which we've described. We've started to describe the problem, the bodily 2 or 3-fold illness. And weight, my experience. This is what happened to me. This isn't a theory out of a book. That's the weight, the depth and the weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must, circle the must, be grounded in a power greater than themselves if, I call that the biggest 2-letter word in the book, if. I love that word. I circle and underline the ifs. Quite often there are promises in the book which are followed by if or preceded by if. You can have these promises if you work for them. Things are going to go pear-shaped if you don't continue doing what you've been doing, if you rest on your laurels, and so on. So if they are to recreate their lives, if I want to recreate my life, my ideals must be grounded in a power greater than myself. That's what the book says. If I'm desperate, I will take on board these suggestions. If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while on the firing line, see the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. How fortunate are we today that this series of events took place? Just beyond grateful. We feel, after many years of experience, that we have found nothing. Again, that's an absolute. They found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. And altruistic I just listed as selfless. Helping others with no expectation of return, recognition, payment, anything. And continuing on, this is kind of moving on to a bit of a new idea here. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. So it doesn't say alcoholics, but everyone. Why else would they drink it? Quite often it doesn't taste that good. Okay, some people say they drink it for the taste. Okay. But of course they do. It's a social lubricant. It lowers inhibitions. People loosen up a bit, start telling a few jokes. Yeah, people drink for the effect. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. So this is pretty scary. When someone is acting erratically, when they're under the spell of alcoholism and they can't see it, because those rationalizations and justifications in the alcoholic mind have made insanity seem sane and normal, and they can't understand what everyone's complaining about. Scary stuff. They are restless, irritable, and discontented until they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. So the cycle of the spree is described here. And again, Joe and Charlie, there's some workbook sheets or big book study sheets that have a really good diagram of the cycle of the spree. Restless, irritable, discontent, filled with guilt, shame and remorse, resentments, fears and harms. So just riddled with and negativity and all kinds of anxieties and depressions. So the alcoholic without a drink, without a solution, is restless, irritable, and discontented. So the ease and comfort which comes at once, top of XXIX, Roman numeral 29, drinks which they see others taking with impunity. So impunity, no consequences, no problem. No, it's all good. They can get away with it. Nothing happens. Yeah, so I see other people drinking, telling some jokes, having a nice time, getting a bit more friendly, having fun. If they can do it, I can do it. So says the alcoholic who's in the dark about the reality of their situation. After they have succumbed to the desire or obsession again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving, I've underlined phenomenon of craving, so twice it's mentioned the phenomenon of craving here, develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again, or some kind of other resolution. I'll never drink spirits again. I'll never go to that club again. I'll never hang out with those people again. I'll never drink on an empty stomach or something. Some kind of firm resolution, thinking, being deluded that I have some control over this thing, but I am powerless. Well, I was powerless, not today. This is repeated over and over. How many times did I repeat that in my 12-year drinking career? Thousands, probably. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. So that's a pretty gloomy and dark prognosis for the alcoholic who's stuck in that cycle, feeling uncomfortable, irritated and irritable, restless without a drink. And maybe purposely creating an argument in the home not even conscious maybe that that's what they're doing, so that there's a good excuse to storm out of the house, down to the bar or the bottle shop and have a drink, not knowing that actually they're being driven by this illness. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, so we've got this darkness, this gloominess, and we've got some really good news just around the corner. Once a psychic change, I've underlined psychic change. Oh, hang on, my laptop wants to do something. Hopefully it doesn't do it just yet. Once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, which often leads to suicide. Something like 30% of alcohol or addiction is implicated in something like 30% of suicides. I guess it could even be higher. So this person suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. What a promise. I've highlighted that in pink. Once a psychic change has occurred, down to easily able to control his desire for alcohol. That's one of the many, many promises of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's powerful. Because again, out there in the mainstream world, we're told, you will relapse, you will relapse. I've heard counsellors say that to people, but here we're being told, once you've had a psychic change, a revolutionary change in the way you think, your attitude to life and God and the people around you, the problem will be solved. The problem will not exist anymore. But those promises come further on in the book. But the only simple, there's not too much to think about here. The only effort necessary, I've circled necessary, that's a big word for must, being that required, circle that, so kind of saying must twice, this is important, to follow a few simple rules. I've underlined that. A few simple rules, which is the steps. That's it. Shop shut? No, we're only at the start of the book. But that's it. You know, I just think, wow, here we go. So much power already. But let's keep going. I just love that. That's one of my really favourite parts in the book. It really is. Because it just tells me so much promise and simplicity and clear instruction. All I need to do is follow these few simple rules. That's it. That's all I need to do. It's not rocket science. I don't need a PhD. Just follow these simple rules. I'm just checking the time. We finish at the top of the hour. I will switch the recording off, but we'll stay here for 15 minutes afterwards if anyone has questions or comments or wants to have a 2-minute share or something, depending on how many, if any, stay back. So that's actually, I'll just keep going a little bit longer. But I've actually written in pencil here after a few simple rules, page 567, appendix 2, which would have to be the spiritual experience. At that point, could be a good time to read the spiritual experience, although it's not footnoted here, because the psychic change, that's the spiritual experience, spiritual awakening. Once a person's had a spiritual experience or spiritual awakening, it's going to be alcohol that recedes back into the distance, back there. Then we get on with the business of living. I'll continue. Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal, "Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me." Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Or, in my personal opinion, that person's filled with ego and arrogance. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power, so again, the link to human power being insufficient, 3 times at least, we've heard it already in the book, is needed. I've circled needed, that's a must. Something more than human power is needed to produce the essential. Essential is must. It has to happen. Without a psychic change, an alcoholic is doomed. That is the opinion of the writers of this book. Essential psychic change. So essential means, like vital. You think about your vital organs in your body. Thanks, Cologne. I just had a note there that Rach timed the shares. Thanks, appreciate that. And that always does help. Though the aggregate of recoveries, so total number of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort, is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Again, calling for humility from people. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control or willpower, therefore a choice. Sometimes we're still told, no, it's not an illness, it's a choice. And I can't go with that, obviously, because I'm an alcoholic. But who would choose to destroy their life, their relationships, their career, their opportunities, the relationships with those they hold most dear? I've had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal with which was to be settled on a certain date favourably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date. 1 drink. They gave in to the obsession. So that obsession of the mind is whirring in the background constantly, whether a person's drinking or not. And then the phenomenon of craving. 3rd time it's mentioned here in short succession, at once became paramount, number 1, over and above all else, to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control or willpower. I think that's probably a good point to stop. So step 1, the first 103 pages of the big book, plus the doctor's opinion, contains our 12 steps. And almost half of that is dedicated to step 1. That tells me how important it is that I must understand and accept what step 1 is if I am to proceed, if I'm to have success with the rest of the suggested program of recovery. So we'll continue next week at the top of Roman numeral XXX, page 30, starting on the first full paragraph. There are many situations which arise. And I will just end the recording here. Thanks so much, everyone, for your participation and listening. Pause recording. There it is. Stop.